Miter joints can be somewhat stressful in furniture making. They look easy enough, but in execution, that is the design, the construction, fastening, strengthening, and gluing, the task can be formidable. In the following video, I'll show two different miter joint applications. It also always pays off to work out the details in SketchUp before executing in the shop. In this highboy, there are several miter joints. In this case, they can be simple butt joints as the individual pieces have a good connection to the background structure. But in this square T-table, the miter joints require additional strength. It is a frame, as in a mirror or a picture frame, that holds the top assembly that can float in grooves for expansion and contraction. So in this video, I'll show how to make these assemblies in SketchUp to help out the construction in the shop. In the first case, we've got a simple path for this cornice molding and a small profile that is a group, and I pick Follow Me, edit the group, and click. And I've got a cornice molding assembly here, but it really needs a few extra lines to finish up the miter joint. For example, you can see right here on the bottom face that I need a little bit of an edge here that completes the miter at the bottom, and then there's a missing edge on the top face. And as I complete this edge, you should see the face appear. There it is. In X-ray you can see the miter joint complete with a face at that intersection. So same thing over here. I don't, in this case, separate these two parts of the cornice molding into separate components. I'm done. I'll call this the cornice molding component, and as far as I'm concerned, that's all I need in the shop. I can take this assembly, put it into a scene, and add a few dimensions and take it to the shop and finish the construction. It doesn't help, I don't feel, it doesn't help the case to separate these out into two separate components, since in the shop these simple dimensions of length, width, and depth are easy to see in the completed assembly. So that picture goes to the shop, and I'm done. But in the second case, you really have to separate these out because the components, we don't have a butt joint, we have a strengthened joint in the top frame here. And I chose, there are different ways of strengthening these miters. I chose a bridle joint. Let me just explode this group and then pull the top pieces out of the grooves in the frame. The top floats in the groove. There's some extra space in the groove that allows expansion and contraction in this case. So in this case I need to have separate components. The short one, the short piece of the frame, and the long piece. So we've got a bridle joint here that has a tongue, and then it has a socket on the other part of the assembly. So How would you go about making this strengthened bridal joint miter? Starting out the same way as we did before, we've got a path all the way around, and I can select that path and pick follow me. I have a profile again that is a group. Edit that group, click on the face, and complete the frame. Now, there are the same kinds of missing edges, like up here at the top, and then at the bottom I need a edge placement here. Because I have a groove that was built in to the profile, there are a couple edges that are required to complete the miter joint, and we should see the face show up. There it is. And I can do that same operation at this end to complete the miter joint. There are the two edges at the groove, another edge up here at the top, and again at the bottom. And there's the face. I'll do that again at the other end of the short piece, and by doing it at this end as well, then I have two good faces on both ends of the short frame component. There it is. Since I will be making two separate components here, I don't need half of these, and I'll do a right to left selection and hit delete. And the cutoff was, because of the way I did that selection, I'm cutting off right at the miter joints. But now I need to separate these two pieces into separate components. Right now I've got a group here. I need to edit the group, something that I often forget to do before an operation. Edit the group. Now I can do a left to right selection on this part of the frame and make it a component. And notice down here at the bottom of the dialog, I'm going to call this the short frame, but there's a box down here at the bottom that I want checked because I want to have this selection, have the component, that selected part become the component. Also the same operation for the long frame. The check mark is already there. Call it the long frame. And I have two components now. And I don't need the group that I started out with, so I can explode the group, get rid of some of these extra. Now, yeah, there are the two components. And I'll move the short one out here a little bit so that we can work on the miter joint itself. get rid of these extra edges. And I picked a bridle joint for the strengthening here. I've got faces on both ends of that component. I've got a face over here on the end of that one, and I'm missing a face here on this long component, but I can edit the component, pick the line tool, trace over an edge, and return that face. So I will go ahead and put the tongue on, well, I'll just go ahead and put it on this long component here. It doesn't really matter which component we use. And I want to put the tongue in the center, at the midpoint of this component. So I'm just finding the midpoint with this guideline, and then I will copy guidelines off from the center line 1/8 of an inch, so that I have a 1/4 of an inch tongue. At this point, I'm going to edit the component and draw a line out on the, in this case it happens to be the blue axis, and at the longest part of the edge there I've got a triangle for that tongue that I can push pull, copy push pull up to the top, and then copy push pull down to the bottom, and erase the extra edges. So that completes the tongue portion of the miter joint. Get rid of the extra guidelines and move over to work on the socket in the short piece. I'll just go ahead and connect the two and use the tongue to create the socket. Let's get rid of these extra lines. They're a little bit confusing at this point. So I'm simply triple clicking on the components, and then right clicking and picking soften to get rid of those, hide all those edges. And you can see the tongue protruding through. I'll just go ahead and do a select, an intersect, and that will mark the socket lines on the short piece, and go into X-ray to finish up. Just trace over the tongue to create the boundaries of the socket. There's a face that we need, and we need some edges here. And to complete that socket, I need to pull this apart. Knock off X-ray. Move tool, and pull this apart. So far the socket over here is closed up, and I need to just knock off some edges here to open it up. And it looks like we've got a clean socket with a perfect fit, and that should give that miter joint quite a bit of extra strength with the gluing. Put it back together, and I can show these two pieces separately in different scenes and dimension them for shop work.